Hello and welcome back to the Joyful Soul Creates. Charlotte here, and today I have a design team project for Skull and Cross Buns, and I'm going to be making a shaped phone card. This wasn't what I had originally planned when I started working on my design team project for today, but I had a lot of fun making it, so that's the main thing. To start with, I have a panel of card which is going to be my screen of my phone, which is cut to approximately 3¼ by 4¾ inches. So that's 12.6 by 8.3 centimeters. I've masked off the top inch also, and I'm going to be ink blending over that with Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide. This is a very light blue color. And I'm working on a craft sheet so that I'm not getting my mat dirty. This sheet is actually from the baking supplies section. It's like a Teflon baking sheet that you would use instead of baking parchment, but it works just as well as a craft mat, so that's what I am using it for. And I would start my ink blending off on the sheet and then bring the ink onto the panel. This way I don't get any splotchy areas. I have also rounded the corners of this panel using my corner chomper, and I did the 1/4 inch corner setting for these. So once I finished ink blending that top portion, I cleaned up my craft mat and I moved the mask to cover that blue area now. So that blue area is like the top portion of your chat message area, which would show the name of who you're communicating with, your recipient. So now I'm going to add the chat bubbles, and I'm using the Speech Bubbles large stencil from Skull and Cross Buns, and I'm going to use the one bubble in the top left. I've used some more post-it tape to mask off the bubbles nearby so that I don't get any ink where I don't want it. And I'm going to start by ink blending this first bubble using cracked Pistachio Distress Oxide. So I use 2 different colours for my bubbles to help differentiate between which is you talking and which is the recipient talking. And as you can see, I did this first one so it goes slightly off the top of the screen just to make it look more dynamic and more like an actual messenger conversation. I will clean up my stencil, and I'm going to use the exact same speech bubble. I'm just going to flip the stencil over so it's facing the other way. Unless the stencil has words that need to be read a particular direction, you can flip any stencil over the other way to get a slightly different look. So as I said, I used cracked pistachio for the first speech bubble, and then for the bubble that is going to be you, so the person who is sending the messages, I'm going to use worn lipstick for that one. I thought the pink and the kind of tealy green and blue were a nice colour combination, so that's why I chose those. I'll again clean off the stencil, and I'm just using a rag to wipe the colour off the stencil, not even a wet rag, just a dry rag to pick up the colour. I'll put my stencil back into place on the left hand side again to do another incoming message. So again, I'll be using the cracked pistachio. I first lay down all my bits of post-it tape to cover the areas I don't want ink on. There was one tiny little corner of that underneath speech bubble which the mask didn't quite reach, so I just put my finger over that when I was blending near that to make sure I wouldn't get the colour there. If I had got the colour there, I could probably have used my Tombow Mono Sand Eraser to pick it up and it wouldn't have been a problem, but it's better to not get it there in the first place if I can help it. I decided I needed more definition to my blended areas, so I used a ruler and my Sharpie to add a line between the blue top bar and the first speech bubble, and then I'm going to lay my speech bubble stencil back over the top of each of the bubbles and draw around them with my Sharpie to give each of them a black outline. This will also help to tie in the other black elements that will be included later in the design, so the wording and also the black surround to the phone. And this is very easy to do just using the stencil as a guideline. It doesn't take very long at all to draw those in. Next, I'm going to work on my stamping, and I'm using 2 stamp sets from Skull and Cross Buns for this. I'm mostly using the Brush Hearts stamp set because this is kind of a love themed, it could be Valentine's, it could be an anniversary, any kind of love themed card. First I'm going to put in where the recipient's name would be. If you were making this card custom made for someone, you could actually spell out their name if you have some alphabet stamps, or even write it in yourself. I'm just putting the word you, and I'm also going to put a little heart there. For now I'm just laying everything out to see where I want it to go, and I was thinking I want to use this Be Mine stamp, but it's too long, so I want to stack it. Normally I would just mask it to stamp it, but I couldn't tell if it was going to fit, so I decided to do something I've never done myself before and cut my stamps apart. I've seen a lot of people do it, but I've never tried it myself, and I decided to bite the bullet, so to say, and try it on this card, and it did help me make sure that my wording would fit how I wanted it, which it did, which is very nice. And of course they can easily be lined up again and stamped together if you want to stamp them in a line. And then I had to spend a little time picking up a cat hair off my project. If any of you have pets, you will know that pet hairs get everywhere and they like to stick to your stamps, so it's good to try and brush them out the way when you spot them. So once I had everything lined up in my MISTI, I started on the stamping. Initially I was just going to stamp with black ink, but the Distress Oxide actually kind of resists it a bit, so it was pooling and I didn't like the way it looked. So I instead stamped with some embossing ink, and I'm going to black heat emboss them, which I think actually looks better anyway. I should have just done this in the first place. So I'll brush away the excess powder with my paintbrush and heat set them, and then I stamped on my other words, so the B from Be Mine, and then I also masked off the top of that top speech bubble again so that I could stamp Yay, which comes from the Quirky Sentiment stamp set. And finally I added 2 hearts from the Brush Heart stamp set just to fill in some of the gaps, and I've heat embossed them in white. I want them to be red, and you'll see how I do that later. If you have red embossing powder, you could just emboss them in red straight away, but as I didn't have red embossing powder, I did them in white to start with, and I will fix them later. I used some Frosty pink Altenew ink to add a couple of hearts onto the inside portion of the phone just to finish up the inside of the card. I don't often add things to the inside of the card, but I thought it needed something. Then I have created my surround from some matte black card. This is kind of like, in a way, like mirror card, but not shiny, it's matte. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it, but it's almost like chalkboard looking. So I cut that to be 5 1/4 by 3 3/4, so that's about 1/2 inch larger on each side than the screen, and I used the same corner chomper to round the corners on that. The back panel is scored 3/8 of an inch down. I put some strong double-sided tape on the top of the scored area and pressed that onto the back of my card. I actually used a snippet of card for my back panel, so it's smaller than the phone, the front of the phone, but you could of course cut it to the same size and round it around the corners as well to make it a perfect match. Here I am going to make those hearts red as I previously discussed, and I'm going to use some Nuvo drops for this. Again, if you have red embossing powder, just use that for this if you prefer, but I'm going to use this Nuvo jewel drops in Strawberry Coulis. The reason I needed the white underneath is because these are translucent, so the colour beneath would show through. So I needed the white base to make sure they would stay looking red, rather than, for example, the one on the top bar would turn kind of purpley looking on the blue. And then I felt like the bottom of the card needed something just to help balance it a bit. I'm using some more Nuvo drops, this time in Sea Breeze, and just adding 3 dots. I chose the Sea Breeze because it kind of balances well with the blue at the top, and I thought the 3 dots looked a bit like someone is typing still, so I felt that fitted the theme of the card quite well. And that completes my shaped foam card. I think it's a bit different from what I normally make. I don't think I've ever made a shaped card, maybe one, but certainly not shared on my channel that I can think of. I had a lot of fun making it, even if it's not really exactly my usual style. It was something a bit different. I'd love to know what you think of it, what you think you might do differently if you were to make it. For example, I think that white background seems a bit stark. I might add something else to that. I think also it could be fun to put acetate or something over it to give it the kind of shiny look of a phone screen. There are a lot of ways you could change it up if you wanted. If you would like any of the products I used on today's card, they're all linked and listed down in the description box below, and you can use code DESIGNTEAM over at Skull and Cross Buns site to save 10% on your order. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you will give it a thumbs up, perhaps leave a comment down below, and maybe even subscribe to see my future videos. There are a couple of other videos on screen as well that you might enjoy if you'd like to see more from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!